All right, I will kick this off. Good morning, everyone. Welcome for joining me today. And morning, I have no idea where y'all are at. It's morning here in Arizona on the western part of the United States, but I'm sure we have people from all over the place in the U.S. and other countries as well. Nope, all good there. So, welcome. Thank you for joining me. And we'll probably keep this fairly short to around a half an hour or so. But it's just me having a chance to finally kind of explain some of the new things that are in the brand new update for the SEC 587 SANS Advanced OSINT course. A little bit of background. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. My name is Matt Edmondson. I was a federal agent with Homeland Security here in the United States for almost 22 years. So worked a lot with the intelligence community, right? Obviously, I was law enforcement for most of my adult life at this point. And I started up several OSINT units with that and kind of ran that, did a lot of consulting things too. I had outside work authorized, which was very, very fortunate for me, allowed me to teach for SANS, etc. And a little cheat code I had too, when you're filling out a business plan, they always tell you, like, what is your unfair advantage, right? What advantage do you have? Why is this going to work for you, whereas maybe it wouldn't work for someone else? And for me, it's the technical experience, it's the law enforcement intelligence community experience, but also a total cheat code of my wife. My wife ran cyber threat intelligence for a Fortune 100 and is now at an even larger company. And so it gives me a very, very well-rounded perspective of what needs people have, really, no matter what their background and where they're coming from, and how to solve that. And so a couple of years ago now, I wrote the SEC 497 Practical OSINT course for SANS. SANS had an advanced OSINT course too, but I had nothing to do with that. It was written by three people who were all friends of mine, and they did a great job on that. But things happen, life gets tough sometimes. And so SANS stepped in and they asked me if I could help out with the SEC 587 and eventually take it over as far as all the updates, maintaining it, etc. And so I agreed to do that. And this update that we turned in a few weeks ago that just went live is really the first version where there's still some legacy content in there, but I really feel like it has my stamp on it, right? And it's allowed me to. The SEC 497 is fantastic, but anyone who's ever taken it with me knows we are going till five, like every single day we're going through material, right? There's really not an early day as we're going through because there's so much crammed in there, and there really isn't a lot of room to cram other things without taking something out. And so the SEC 587, the reason I agreed to do it was it allowed me to deep dive on a few things. It allowed me to talk about some topics that I would love to talk about, but frankly, there just wasn't room in the 497. And so, like I said, this new update, there still is some legacy content, but there is a ton of new content. That's why we titled this webinar, right? 20 new labs. That's an example of how much new content there is on there. So like I said, I'm just going to spend a little bit here kind of going through and talking about what some of the big things are. And we'll start off with day one of the content. It still starts off, we're talking about assessing, rating the reliability of information, a few kind of fundamental information analysis. As my one of my instructors, Dutch OSINT guy Nico, always says, it's not open source information gathering, it's open source intelligence, right? Actually providing value on that. And then it shifts though. And for the last part of day one, we have two brand new sections, one on Russian OSINT with two labs in that section, which are a lot of fun, and then one on Chinese specific OSINT, which is really a struggle. For the Russian OSINT, one of my good friends does Russian OSINT almost exclusively for their jobs. And so I absolutely reached out to tap them and kind of pick their brains and things as I was working on that section of resources that they were finding valuable. And so it's good for general information on finding people, some business research, find ties to US businesses, businesses that are cleared to do classified type of work for the Russian government, right? These are all topics that we cover in that Russian section. And then, like I said, we have two labs in that section as well, too. And then China. And China is tough. Right? Anyone who's done any type of OSINT with China recently knows that China is getting even tougher. The Great Firewall used to really be focused on keeping Chinese citizens from accessing Western resources. All right, you type Tiananmen Square into Google and you see information about the historical massacre there. You type it into a Chinese-based search engine and you just get pictures of flowers and everything else. So but it's shifted now, and the Great Firewall, it still has that same mission, but now it's also right on keeping people out, right, making it difficult for people to access Chinese-based resources. And it's because China has realized how powerful OSINT is, and they've made it tough to gather information on businesses, on citizens, etc. And so in this Chinese section, not only we talk about what some of these challenges are, but we talk about ways that a lot of people aren't aware of and don't think of to help us do things like access these Chinese websites. And even like they're like, oh, we'll just run a VPN out of there. That can be inconsistent, right? So what are some ways we can access these sites in the first place? What are some ways we can get a country code 86 Chinese-based phone number that is required for some of the apps like QQ, etc.? So we talk about what these challenges are and kind of different ways that we can overcome them in the Chinese section. And then we have a lab for the Chinese section that's really kind of fun too, where we practice the techniques for accessing some of these restricted sites. And so that's really what's new on day one. If we shift now to the class page, let us take a look at day two. Day two is all on Python for OSINT. This is not Python for the sake of Python. SANS has two Python courses written by Mark Baggett, who, when I say that he has forgotten more about Python than I will ever know, that is not false modesty. He truly has. This is Python specifically for OSINT, right? Gathering information, parsing through that information, interacting with APIs, including the OpenAI AI API, which we do in a lab, right? Setting up persistent monitoring efforts, all of these. When I agreed to take over the SEC 587 last year, the very first thing I did was rewrite all of day two completely from scratch. And it wasn't that the old material in there was so egregious or anything like that. Things changed, right? Things have changed. The bar for how good you need to be with Python, for the skills that you need to have, is really more about understanding now than it is writing code. I don't know if any of you have ever familiar with, if you played with it, this development tool called Cursor. And there are lots of development tools out there that let you integrate AI capabilities from large language models to help you write code. But if you've never played with Cursor, download it. It's free for a long time before they say, hey, can you become a paying customer? And then it's 20 bucks a month. But it is absolutely ridiculous. So it looks very similar to Visual Studio here, but I can type Control I and say, I need to monitor if sites on the internet and dark web are online. And I have something like this monitoring a lot of different sites that we use in the labs for the 497 and 587. Write me Python that, move my little window down here, checks a list of sites every hour and alerts me via Slack webhook if any site fails 3 checks in a row. And this is the logic that I have. Now, I'm just sitting there from within my IDE. And if you see here, Cursor integrates with a Claude from Anthropic, which is my favorite model, and OpenAI. And you don't have to configure your AI API keys or anything. Like it's all just built in there. They take care of it for you. And I still haven't hit the point where it's asking me, I've been using this a ton. I still haven't hit the point where it's asking me to pay. I'll probably become a paying customer later on today, just so I have that. But if it's 20 bucks a month and it takes care of all this. And if you look, it is writing all of the code for you. And it just writes it to this folder where I pointed it at before we started here. And now I have this code right here. Can I select the sites in a config file? And now we just kind of interact with it a little bit more. And so now if we look here, it just created in this directory from scratch a config.yaml file. Now it's modifying this code here to sit there and use it. And we can sit there, accept the code, and just accept all the changes right there. And now our code is updating. If you have a problem, you can select part of this code. We can say, how would you improve this code? And we see here, we've already got the proxy set up SOCKS58, so it can actually tunnel out to the dark web through Tor as a service right there. We ask it ways to improve it. It comes up with these ways. And then if we like the improvements it's making, let's see here. But once it is done, we should just be able to accept all the changes we gain if we like these different changes. Where I've done before too, okay, make this change and make this change, but don't make this change. And it's just integrated and it does this for us. It's not just for creating from scratch either. I've opened up code that I wrote maybe 2 years ago with the assistance of AI, and I've told it, how would you improve this code? It makes a bunch of great suggestions. And then I'm like, yeah, just make the changes and it does it. I had a meeting yesterday with a new client. Here we go. Yep, accept all. And now the changes are just made in line. It is ridiculous, right? Ridiculous. I had a meeting with a new client yesterday, and we were going over my persistent monitoring stack and how the alertings work and everything. And they were very impressed. And they're just like, man, like I'm sitting there thinking, AI wrote pretty much all that code, right? Pretty much all that code that I'm using, AI wrote. And so seeing this, how integrated, right? How, in a lot of ways, easy AI makes it. Teaching Python in the old way just doesn't make a lot of sense anymore, right? It's more about understanding the code that we're looking at, understanding what's possible. And whenever I teach it, I'm constantly talking about different ways that I use Python code in my life to help me monitor, to help me search, to help me parse, to help me do these things, just so people understand what is possible. And that's really what the bar looks like right now. And so, like I said, that was the first thing I did was rewrite day two because this is kind of what it looks like, right? And so teaching things the old way, the ways that no one actually uses anymore, don't make a ton of sense to me. So that's day two on Python for OSINT. We talk, there's an optional, you see there's 7 labs, there's 6 that we go through. There's an optional 7th one at the very end of the day because we have a section on basically taking your code and if you want to push it to the cloud. We focus on Amazon's cloud for that section, but we talk about actually taking your code, turning it into Lambda functions, things like that. So that was day two. Day three, ooh, this is a fun one. Day three is a lot of fun. So we start off with, we have the legacy sections on image verification and video verification, but then we quickly move into, we have a short section on steganography, right? Hiding information in images. And this is almost never seen outside of a CTF, right? You don't see this in the real world too often, but I have ran into it operationally. And anyone who's dealt with it operationally knows the hardest part was steganography from an OSINT perspective, not from a digital forensics perspective. Digital forensics, everyone's like, aha, the hash is going to change. Well, that's great if I have the before and after, but I usually only have the after, right? Unless I actually have control of the system. But for steganography, the challenge has always been like you don't even know if it's there, or you don't know if there's something hidden in there or not. We now have some new advancements in that space to where we actually can check. And so for years, like people have tried to talk about steganography, and usually I kind of discourage that. And I kind of like, I remember one time laughing at someone, and not in a mad way. You know, we had a very close relationship, but I'm like, you're not even looking at the overt stuff and you're worried about covert channels. Come on. And so steganography really, just because it's been so difficult, hasn't been something that we've really covered. But now it's like, oh, we actually have some new developments. So we have a short section on what those look like and a fun lab on that one. The first time I've only taught this new version once, everyone was loving that section. Then we get to something that I absolutely love though, and that is AI for audio analysis. In the 497, we have an AI section and we have, I love this lab where we use a tool called Whisper from OpenAI. And if you've never used Whisper before, it's black magic. You give it an audio, a video file, and it transcribes everything that is being said in there in dozens and dozens of different languages. And it can translate it to English if you want it to. And it is free and it is amazing and it is offline and it's black magic. I don't know how else to describe it. And so now that we have an audio source from either audio or video file, and we can transcribe every word that's said, you may kind of have a feeling of, okay, well, that's solved, right? There's really nothing else to do with audio. And that's not quite true, right? Maybe it is, but depending on your needs, that's not quite true. And if you're asking yourself what is left, well, what's left is what we all cover in this section right here. Things like speaker diarization. And if you're wondering what in the heck that is, it's Whisper tells us everything that was said, and it's all time stamped too. You can take it in and load it back into a video as subtitles. In the 497 lab, we take a video that's in Russian, use Whisper to not only transcribe but translate it, and then rewatch the video. And now there's English subtitles. It's once again black magic. But I said, if you're wondering what else is left, speaker diarization is taking that audio and figuring out how many speakers there were and who said what. Right. And so being able to say, oh, there was actually four speakers here. And so speaker one said this, then speaker two said this, then speaker one replied with this, and going through and answering that. That is very, very useful for transcribing in a lot of different ways. We also cover using AI to clean up audio. And we talk about basically fingerprinting as well, too, which is very niche, but for some people who need it, it's amazing. And what I mean by that is with less than 2 seconds of audio from an individual, we can figure out a distinct fingerprint of their voice. And now, when you give that fingerprint and you check it against all this other audio capability, all this other audio samples that we have, we can instantly identify, aha, that's this person. Aha, that's this person. They spoke right there between this point and this point right there. A lot of people are like, that's interesting, but I don't really find it too useful. If you've ever done any SIGINT work, signals analysis, you're like, pump that straight into my veins. I need that. Right. And so these are some of the things that, like I said, kind of using AI for audio analysis and taking it to the next level. And the kind of the last thing we talk about in there is, once again, we have an all new section on gaming. And that might sound a little bit funny to be covered gaming in an OSINT course. It is absolutely not, for a variety of reasons. Finding people that really can't give up games is one thing, but also just for information gathering, being familiar with that. We always see classified data, right, leaked in Discord, leaked in gaming forums, not only from the US, from China, right? Certain things like that. Like, no, this game isn't accurate. Look, this is actual specs in the system. That's classified. Thanks. Yeah. But also, just from an information gathering perspective, right? Think about this. If you're going to try to elicit information from someone, do you want to try to go get them at their work where they're kind of on guard, right? Where they're dressed up, where they're doing those things and trying to elicit information? That might be a tough time. Or do you want to try to hit them up at the bar after work? Right after they're a drink or two in, after it's a little looser with truth serum, aka alcohol, right? And that's kind of just building some rapport, striking up some conversation, and that's when you can find out things that maybe necessarily they don't want to tell you. And gaming is a lot of times the exact same way, right? We have someone who, in the real world, or maybe even on LinkedIn or Facebook, we would never befriend this person, but all of a sudden, the anonymity now behind like just a gamer ID, you're sitting there playing Diablo 4, whatever game it is you like, someone that in the real world you would never befriend. Now you're just sitting there kind of loose, relaxed, and chatting with. So it can be a great place for gathering information as well, too. So we just talk a little bit about the gaming ecosystem and have a fun lab using that as well. So that is day 3. Now we go to day 4. We start off talking about making sock puppets, trying to automate these, some different things. We have a lab on day 5 that can help out with that as well too. We talk about OPSEC and do a lab for that, which we talk about in 497, right? When you download these documents, how do we actually determine that they're safe? We talk about that in the 497. In the 587, we take it a little bit further, right? How do you one of the things that I used to do when I was with the government is try to do semi-regularly kind of elevated scans on our OSINT systems, right? We obviously had antivirus and software like that running, but every once in a while, just doing a deeper dive on that system, right? Looking at the traffic coming off it for a while and determining, hey, is there anything here funky, right? Maybe something's hiding from the operating system, but it still has to talk. We can still see it on the wire. So we talk about how to do that in a push button, simple, automated way in that the first lab that we have in this section. We then talk about dark web. We've got a couple of dark web labs, one for monitoring, and the other is a really, really fun one on dark web de-anonymization, right? Basically being able to use some of these techniques and tricks, all of which have worked fairly recently to find the true IP address of a website on the dark web. So that is a really, really fun lab. That was a fun one to put together. Cryptocurrency, we have an all new cryptocurrency lab. Put in some new case studies, right? Talking about North Korea, the fake IT workers, a few things like that. But the cryptocurrency lab, the old lab that we had in there technically was cryptocurrency. But I wanted a lab where we were actually walking through a cryptocurrency investigation step by step. And so that lab is actually number one, it's a fun one. And number two, there's actually a bonus section that's as long as the regular lab itself. And that's just for taking it a little bit further to see how we can use free resources to kind of map out and investigate some of these cryptocurrency transactions. And then this one is really stretching the limit of what we call OSINT. But if you look here, we have a wireless section. And in the 497, we talk about Wiggle and using Wi-Fi network locations for researching locations. It's something that a lot of people don't think about, and it's very, very useful. But I actually wanted to talk about understanding the kind of RF space a little bit more, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, etc. And for OSINT, there's a term we use in the government a lot, an all source analyst, right? They may not be as good as imagery as someone who does it every day, but they know what they're talking about. They may not be as good as signals intelligence as someone who does it every day, but they know what they're talking about. And part of that is just understanding these spaces, and that's becoming more and more important for OSINT analysts too. If you're watching anything come out of Ukraine, right, there's so much electronic warfare coming out there, so much about drones and wireless and everything else that I think it's worth having a small section to just become a little bit more familiar with this technology. And then we have a lab, which, like I said, full disclosure, is me really stretching the bounds of what we consider OSINT. But even if you're not the one who's in the field gathering this information, it's important to know what is possible. And so you can analyze it, etc. We actually have a lab there on detecting modern drones. And it is just a heck of a lot of fun. We talk about what this space looked like and how we can use our hardware that's $20 or less, right? Like maybe 20 to 24 in some places, a little bit cheaper on like AliExpress or DHgate. Flash that with some custom firmware, and now we're sitting there building a drone detector that can maybe detect drones up to like a kilometer. And this is modern drones, DJI 4s, etc. And so that, like I said, really stretching the bounds of OSINT, but it's a heck of a lot of fun. So forgive me. All right, forgive me. Day five, what do we talk about in here? Automated monitoring, right? If you're familiar with, there are these frameworks out there like these sites, make.com, Zapier.com, where it lets us stick a lot of things together, right? And we can maybe take our OpenAI API key and now give it access to Google Docs and now give it access to our Twitter account and these different things. And we can make these automated workflows without having to really write any code. And these are incredibly powerful and a kind of fun thing to play with, but they're not free. They're not prohibitively expensive. But there is one other one in this space called N8N. N8N also has a cloud-based offering, just like the others do, but they do something a little bit different. They also have a version that you can host locally. And so now all of a sudden, in addition to helping out with potential OPSEC issues, in addition to eliminating cost, right, we have full control of these automated workflows. So we actually talk about that, and this is a brand new lab where we get some experience using N8N to kind of automate workflows, interact with a command line utility on the operating system, etc. So that was a fun one to put together. And then we have some sections on dealing with password protected files. A lot of the SANS pen testing classes will have a section on password cracking, right? You've gathered hashes from a Linux system or from a Windows system, and you need how to crack it. And so people try to do that, and they're like, "Oh, this is a lot of fun. I like that." And then you try to crack the password for an Excel spreadsheet, a PDF, a RAR file, a zip file, and you're like, how do I get the hash from a RAR file from a PDF, right? And so in this dealing with password protected files, the lab is a heck of a lot of fun. We have a password protected zip file, a password protected Excel spreadsheet, a Word doc, all of these different things that we go through step by step of the process to extract the hash and then a systematic methodology to crack those passwords. And this is once again, we talk about kind of taking things to the next level. In SEC 497, we talk about finding files on different websites. We talk about finding exposed files in the cloud, like in buckets, etc. Usually these are wide open, right? Usually we can just open up the document, but sometimes they're password protected. How do we actually deal with that? This is how we actually deal with that, right? And then we have the legacy content in there on aviation OSINT, maritime OSINT for ships, and then a section on secrets, right? And secrets is a fun one. And what I mean by secrets is authentication credentials, right? Uh, Several times in the past year or so, year, 2 years, an organization will come to me. They've been hacked. They're not coming to me for incident response or anything like that. What they're coming to me is we had an incident, we dealt with it. We know what credentials were used. We killed the credentials. Now, what they're trying to figure out is where did these credentials get leaked? Right? How did these actually get out there? Because you need to understand the root cause. Otherwise, you're just slapping a band-aid over something, right? You actually want to be able to fix it. Maybe a developer's box got compromised, right? And their stuff is out there in these info stealer logs that are getting posted on Telegram and other places. Maybe it's an old like GitHub, something buried in an old GitHub commit that is difficult to find, but someone found it. Or maybe, we've seen this before too. Developers will accidentally, I'm on, I think like 6 different GitHub repositories. And so we'll see developers who will accidentally check code in for their work on their own personal exposed GitHub, right? These are different things. And so a tool that we can use Trufflehog to kind of go through there, identify some of this information and what this looks like. And so, like I said, all in all, there's still some legacy content in here, but 20 new labs, right? And there's things we didn't even talk about. We have a section on advanced enumeration with a ridiculous cloud resource for cloud enumeration, a lot of other stuff here too. So I just wanted to, my goal was to spend about half an hour. We're at about that mark now, 28 minutes in. If you have any questions, let me know either in this format or if you want to hit me up. My DMs are open on LinkedIn, Twitter, everything else, etc. But thank you for spending a few minutes with me this morning or wherever it is for you, and kind of talking about the some of the new things that are coming in that are there in the SEC 587 now. Nothing is ever a work in progress. All right, you don't agree to write an OSINT course that you without knowing that you're going to be constantly updating it. But yeah, this is like I said, the first version that really felt like it had a big part of my stamp on there. So I'll hang out for a minute. If there's any questions, let me know. I'll do my best to answer that. And otherwise, like I said, thank you for spending some time with me and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you. Got a raised hand here. Yeah, there should be a way to answer type the questions in there. I see that, Jordan. Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions in the question and answer section. I see a hand raised, but oh, here we go. What's the name of the AI assisted code generator, Cade? Cursor. So yeah, Cursor. If we it's amazing. It's I just started playing with it not that long ago, and I'm already hooked. I got my wife hooked on it now too. It is black magic. It is. Like I said, the 20 bucks. It's free for a while. Like I've been using it a ton, and I still haven't. What it does is basically gives you like I think 500 lookups going against OpenAI or Claude. By default, it's set to Claude, which is the one that I use anyway. Usually 3.5 Sonnet because it's just so much better at writing, frankly, than OpenAI's is still. But but yeah, it gives you like 500 free uses for that before it's like, hey, can you start paying? But the paying is 20 bucks a month. Like that's ridiculous, right? For not having to bring in your own API keys or anything else for them just handling everything. Yeah, so Cursor. com. It is fantastic. Check it out. So a lot of my old persistent monitoring code, when I first started playing with Cursor, I you basically just bring your code in and you just hit Control L to either select part of your code or all of your code, and then just start chatting with it. It's insane. How would you make this better? You saw, right? And just yeah, do it. Yeah, it works like a champ. And it's like I said, I know there's other things that kind of bring in AI, but this just makes it so incredibly easy and seamless. I can't imagine using anything else. So your hermit beard. Thank you, Dario. Thank you, Dario, my friend. I appreciate that. Yeah, I tried to it's a little unkempt. It could use to be cleaned up a tiny little bit there. So yeah. It's late for you over there too, Dario, man. You got to get to bed, my friend. All right. Like I said, if you have a question or whatever that you didn't want to answer in this forum, I'm super easy to get a hold of. Like I said, I'm open on LinkedIn. It's usually where most people do it, on Twitter as well too. So otherwise, like I said, thank you for hanging out here, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.